Welcome back. I wanted to give an update on the computer situation, and as you can probably tell, I still am recording on the tablet because I don't have a computer up and running yet. One of the caveats about working with the tablet as opposed to the camera and editing software is I can't do the little cuts that I normally do, and you get the idea. So the last video I did was just a constant loop of video, and that was it. It was edited on the tablet, just cropped and then uploaded directly to YouTube. No intro, no little thumbnail, nothing like that. And well, unfortunately, that's what's going to happen with this video too, because again, I don't have my computer running yet. This guy right here. It's been a few days. I did do some work on it. Luckily, you can see in the background here, I do have the stuff backed up that I wanted to on the original hard drive. Now, since I used recovery software, what ended up happening was it recovered everything. So, for example, some of the files that I work with for the video editing, when I'm done with them, they get put onto another hard drive, which is actually living right here, right now. And what I do is that just takes it off my computer's hard drive, the one that's in here, and just gives me more space. Well, when I do that, I move the files over, and of course I delete the ones off my hard drive. Those deleted files have been recovered by this program. So now I have the full like 220 gigabytes worth of stuff. So I do have to go and sort through and take some of the stuff out that I already have. There's a couple episodes that I haven't posted yet. They're in the middle of being edited. And that stuff is, luckily that was brought over, but everything else beforehand was too. So I still have to do some moving around. Basically the way it worked was there's an SSD right here, and it was a 1 terabyte hard drive. That was the data drive of this computer. But that just had like the program files, the documents, obviously the camera stuff. Not a whole lot, because again, most of the stuff, my documents, like my pictures and movies and music and stuff like that we share between my wife's computer and mine, lives on this server. So just moving some files around and everything, making some space, getting everything backed up, that was okay. Unfortunately, the hardware still doesn't work. Now, this computer ran for days in this configuration with no problems. The minute I go back into Windows, I have problems. And a lot of those problems I thought would be solved by being able to go into just your general like troubleshooting mode. I can't get it to go any further. It's very, very frustrating. I've been working on computers probably since I was 5, honestly. You know, they've been in my life this whole time. And to have this machine do what it's doing now is very infuriating. And it's worse because I can't fix it. I've gone into safe mode, which, by the way, with Windows 10 and Windows 8.1 and Windows 8, that whole thing changed. You can't just hit the F8 key or Shift F8, because with UEFI and SSDs and all this faster boot time, you basically just glide right over that point where you'd be able to hit those buttons. And most of these computers go straight into Windows now. So you have to either get into Windows and then restart into safe mode, or you can use recovery disk. Well, the recovery disk's in here. I can't get into safe mode. It does the same thing. When you turn this on, it boots up, it starts to get into Windows, it shuts completely down. 3 or 4 seconds later, it powers back up and then starts to reload. And since there was an issue with it, it wants to do a repair recovery, which of course does the same thing. It just gets to a certain point and restarts and then goes back to the beginning again. When I use the recovery disk, I tried to do a system restore. I don't have any restore points. For whatever reason, the last piece of software I put in here just didn't create a restore point, and I haven't been doing it manually either. I tried to re-image the machine back to a previous point. I don't have any images. I am using the server to back up what's called the client. So this is client 1, my wife's computer's client 2. The server has all the client backups. Every night it does backup. And then the server backs itself up twice. So not only are the client backups backed up, but all the documents on the server are also backed up. Here's the problem. My wife's computer won't stay asleep. So it's on 24/7. It has no problem doing backups. I have a backup every single day. I have daily, weekly, and monthly backups cumulative. This computer, I put to sleep every night before I go to bed. I also put it to sleep before I go to work. It stays asleep, which means it doesn't back up. So I only have so many backups for it, and they're all the way back from June. Now, I'm not worried about data. I already saved all that stuff. It's all sitting on the hard drive, which is actually underneath here. That's not the problem. The problem is I don't have an easy way of just re-imaging everything. The other problem is this was originally a Windows 7 machine. You could probably see there was a little sticker here for it. Windows 10 was an upgrade, the free upgrade. What that meant was it took my 7 installation, it verified it with Microsoft's website, it gave me the installation files, it put Windows 10 on here, bing a bang a booma, everything's fine, no problems. No activation needed. I don't have recovery media for that though. You would have a Windows 7 disk, like the one that's right here, and install that with the key, you're good to go. With Windows 10, since they didn't give you disks, since it's an upgrade, it's a little bit of a finicky situation. Luckily, I figured out what I can do is put not the recovery disk, but there's installation media you can download from Microsoft's website. You can stick that disk in here, or USB stick if you go that route. And what you should be able to do is install it from scratch onto my SSD. And then what will happen is once this gets online, it'll contact Microsoft server and ask them if this is a valid installation. It's going to look at the motherboard ID, the processor ID, and I think maybe one other piece of equipment in here to verify that this is a particular machine that's already been activated. Once that happens, it activates and you're back on the Windows 10 again. And that's where I am with this right now. On the SSD, there are a couple files, some stuff I had on the desktop I'm going to try to save. Other than that, once that's saved, I can wipe that off, and hopefully I can format that and put Windows 10 back on it, get it activated, and this is a brand new machine. Well, a newly installed Windows 10 machine. Now, I've been back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for the last couple days, and I haven't really done a whole lot with this thing, and the reason is because, honestly, I want to build a new computer, but I didn't want to build it now. It's too expensive. And I'm not being cheap, it's just I have other things I need to spend my money on. Mainly, if you guys remember, I talked about my shed. It's falling apart. I need to get a new shed. Some of the money I was going to spend on the new computer, I could spend on the shed. In fact, honestly, they're both right around the same price. The other problem was, this really isn't obsolete. I'm going to back up for a second and say, this is a Core i3 processor, first gen. This is the Core i3 550, I believe it was. It's 3.2 gigahertz. I have 16 gigs of RAM here, as I mentioned. I wanted to try to keep that memory. Now, this is DDR3, and it's running at 1600 megahertz. The stuff I had prior was 1333 megahertz. Well, anyway, 1333 is the starting point for this motherboard. You can go up to whatever, and that's considered overclocked memory. But everything else in here, it's USB 2.0. It's got PCIe 2.0 slots. You know, that's basically it. I mean, even the optical drives. I have 2 burners up in the front. They're both IDE drives. Who uses IDE anymore? I mean, luckily everything else is SATA. Even that, it's SATA 2. So I have a SATA 3 SSD and a SATA 3 1 terabyte hard drive hook up to a SATA 2 port. Now, does that make a difference? Of course it makes a difference. But I'll be honest with you, this machine is plenty fast. I do play games on it, but I'm old school gaming. I do like emulators, I play Nintendo games and PlayStation games, and all that stuff runs spectacular. I even do some like Unreal Tournament. The last one I played, Unreal Tournament 3, I could run at full settings. Another thing to keep in mind, I don't have a 1080p monitor, shockingly. So I don't even need to play at that high of a resolution. I play at 1360 by 768 and my big screen behind me here. I'd rather have a big screen with the lower resolution just because I sit so close to it. So it's kind of like I'm stuck in my antiquated ways with this thing. I don't need a brand new machine. That being said, though, I started looking around, and I said this was a first generation Core i3. Well, you have the i3, the i5, and the i7. Without getting really technical, 3 obviously isn't as good as a 5, which isn't as good as a 7, but the thing is, it's all dependent on what you're using it for. I could probably benefit from taking the i7. And I've thought of upgrading the processor to an i7. I can't find any first-gen i7s anymore. It seems like they went right from 1 straight to 2, which is what my wife's machine has. 3, I don't really remember hearing too much about. 4, I'm looking at a i7. It's the i7 4790, which is the latest, greatest, highest end. It's actually the K series too, so it's the 4790K or 4970K, and that's an unlocked processor, so you can overclock it. Well, this was overclocked too. I don't really care about the overclocking. The thing about that processor is it's 4 gigahertz. This is 3.2, so right ahead, I'm already ahead of the game. The other thing is I can go with a 6th gen. 6th gen, which of course is the newest, I can't use the memory because now it's at GDR4. Well, even if I just go with the 4th generation, I'm already ahead of the game with this computer because it's got PCI 3.0, it's got USB 3 slots, you know, it has things that I don't have with this machine. Also, getting into SSDs, and again, try not to be too technical, this has a typical read-write speed. It's like 500 megabytes a second. Well, now they're way up there, and I'm not just talking about a SATA connection. There's a different connection on the motherboard that you can buy a different type of card for and get blazingly fast speeds. Again, I'm not in a race. Sure, you know, people say, well, it renders my video quicker. I'm doing 1080p at 60 frames a second. I'm using my video card, which is actually sitting off over here. I'm using this, and this is an old GeForce 9800 GT with the gig of RAM in it. This thing by standards is antiquated, but there's nothing wrong with it. It runs fine. I mean, other than the problem I'm having with Windows, it's not a hardware problem. It's just this silly problem that happened with Windows, which I still don't really understand what happened. But the point of all this is after looking at all this stuff, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know if I want to go with the older gen, 4th gen, you know, i7 processor and keep my 16 gigs of RAM and keep my, you know, video card for now until I have the money to upgrade that and just go with it, or start from scratch and get a whole new machine. And again, another problem with that is this is a micro ATX motherboard in a I wouldn't say a mid-tower, but this is a micro-tower case. And usually you can tell that by the amount of ports in the front. So I got 2 5.5s and, you know, 2 large and 2 small, basically. Some of these larger cases, they have just more to it. And again, I don't really need it, but, you know, for the future, it would be nice to have all that stuff. I will point out one thing. I did do a full review on this computer. The one thing I will point out with this particular machine, it's flipped. Usually, the window's on the other side of the computer. I don't have the best angle here, and again, this is one of those one-shot deals. If I stop recording this, it ends up like, yeah. So, what happens is this motherboard is flipped the other way. Usually your cards are the opposite direction, and the problem with this is where my cards line up here, if I wanted to put a long card in, it just basically hits right here where these drive bays are. And they made it where these are removable, but you have all this real estate here that you can't utilize. In a case where it would be flipped around the other way, your cards would line up here. So if you had a long card, you'd have no problem getting it in. And a lot of them I see, like, you have like a hard drive cage at the bottom, maybe something in the middle here, and then something at the top, which you could fill with drives. But if you need to put a long video card in something, you could just take that cage right out. So it's a lot of back and forth and back and forth. And by the way, I will mention, both the processors I'm looking at are like $340 just for the processor. You still got to get, you know, in one situation, I still got to get RAM, I still got to get a motherboard, I still got to get a power supply, I still got to get a case. And cases can range from cheap to sky's the limit, depending on what you want to spend. Realistically, if someone said, here's a handful of cash, I would go out and I'd build a machine that was so powerful the lights would dim in the house when I turn it on, figuratively speaking. But I don't really have a use for that, you know. Even if I do play games, I don't play online. I play by myself. I play, you know, skirmish games against the computer or something like that. I'm not going to play random game because honestly, some of these people you play against aren't very fun to play against, if you know what I mean. For all you gamers out there, you know, you can get punked pretty hard by some of these people, and you know, they're running around $4,000 machines, and they'll light your ass up with one of these $700 machines easy. But I'm just not really into all that, you know. A couple of years ago, maybe I was, but this thing suits my needs and probably will continue to suit my needs as long as I can get the damn thing running again. But it's really just a matter of this drive and getting Windows back on it. Simple, end of the story, which I'm going to have to try. At this point in the night, it's already Sunday night, and I wanted to get more of this done already. It just, you know, it's the weekend. I have a ton of other projects to work on, of course, but I got to get this going. This is paramount at this point. This has to get going, or I got to just get off the pot and make a new computer. That's basically it. And again, with that, I started looking around. It is cheaper now to buy your own. I mean, for the amount of money I could spend budget-wise, it would be cheaper for me to just buy one, just off the shelf, buy it with Windows 10 activated on it, ready to go. Problem is when you start looking at hardware, you don't really get the best. Like that K series processor, the one that's unlocked, that might not come in an off-the-shelf computer. You might get one a couple speeds down. It might only come with 4 gigs of RAM. It might have, I don't know, off-brand SSD or an off-brand hard drive or something like that. And I am a brand guy. I've always had Western Digital drives. No, I have never had a problem with them. And if I had a problem with them, I had a warranty, I could send it back and I got replacement of it. The drive that was in here was a prime example of that. That's why I buy good stuff. I don't have any knocks against Seagate. I know they're a good company. I don't own any Seagate drives. Everything I have here is a Western Digital drive, every single one of them. Everyone, except this Kingston drive, because Western Digital doesn't make SSDs that I'm aware of. But the other side is, you know, that with the newer technology, I would love to have one of those new SSDs. It's actually an M.2 port. And I'm going to do a video, once I get up and running, I'm going to do a video on all these technical things, because I've learned a lot in a few days. You know, speeds, you can still go out and buy a 3.2 gigahertz processor. Why is that faster than a new 3.2 gigahertz? It's the architecture. It's how the chip's assembled. It's the amount of heat it gives off. You can get the same speeds with less heat. Less heat means less energy used. And it's cheaper on your electric bill. You know, things like that. Because you got to remember it. If this is running at 75 watts, let's say, that's putting 75 watts of thermal dissipation. That's like a 75 watt light bulb inside your computer running all times. Think of that. So, of course, if you can get a computer that runs more efficiently, it's better in the long run. And again, I mentioned memory. Having 16 gigs of RAM is great. You can have faster RAM now. They make it much faster. I'm looking at DDR4 16 gig at 2133 megahertz. Originally said this was 1333. So off the bat, memory is running 1,000 megahertz faster than what I am already now. So there are definitely advantages to getting new drives. My server, I just put a USB 3.0 port in that so I can put a USB 3.0 backup drive because it was taking all day and all night for my server to back up. Now it finishes in no time, really. But I don't really have a lot of those devices. It's not super necessary. Some of the newer motherboards, they come with USB 3.1, so you're already ahead of the game for the future. And the way that the video card prices are going, you know, they're getting cheaper. But then again, you know, I flipped open, I think it was Newegg or Tiger Direct or one of these online retailers, and they had a $700 video card. You're not going to drop that into a $700 computer. That's going into like a $1,500 computer. Or my favorite one was Newegg. They have packages where you can get like the case and whatever. And one of the packages was like $3,500. For real. It had 2 video cards. It had 2 SSDs ran in parallel for RAID usage. It had a big terabyte hard drive. Oh no, I'm sorry, a 5 terabyte hard drive. Just big, awesome case, 1,000 watt power supply. I mean, it was loaded. You got a lot for the money, but you still had to buy Windows. You still had to activate it and put it together. And, you know, there's no warranty on the computer as a whole, only on the individual parts. I do like the individual warranties because, hey, if your motherboard fries, you just send your motherboard back. But at that point, if it's your motherboard, your whole computer's toast anyway. If my hard drive fried, I had no problem sending it back, and I had backups, and I could still use the computer, though, without it because I have the SSD. So there's different goods and bads, I guess you could say. When you buy it off the shelf and you have a problem, you can pick up the phone and call Dell and say, hey, Dell, I have a problem with my computer, and they fix it, and you're good to go. So there's definitely advantages to it, but when you fix your own computer, you don't need Dell, you don't need HP, you don't need any of those people. You do it yourself. But you run into problems like, what the heck's going on with this thing? Why is the computer just shutting down and not booting up? And if I can't get it into safe mode, I can't fix it. And, so you're left like really pissed, saying, damn it, I broke my computer and I can't get it running. And so it was definitely a sour few days for me. And I really enjoyed making these videos and doing all this stuff, but when I can't work with it the way I'm used to working with it, and using my better camera and editing video and doing all this stuff, it kind of puts a damper on a lot of things. I may have mentioned a while back now that I'm working on a jukebox for somebody, and I only have so much time to work on so many projects on so many days of the week. I don't have all day and all night to work on any one project. So I do a little bit here, I do a little bit there. This thing is taking up all my time for all my projects, and that's kind of bad. So I definitely have to get something rolling. So at that point right now, I'm gonna say adieu. I'm gonna go ahead and just get this little video here uploaded so it's on, and I'm probably gonna have some kind of an addendum at the end of this, which means I'll have to take this footage, upload it to YouTube, shoot new footage, also upload that to YouTube, and then use the YouTube editor to combine them into one video. And that's what I intend on doing. Hopefully this is what you'll see on Tuesday. With that, I'm just gonna dig into this. I'm gonna get that drive backed up any way I need to, get it completely formatted, and put Windows 10 on it. Hopefully I can get a stable running environment, and hopefully I'll have some good news for you guys in just a moment. And of course, here it is, Tuesday night, just about 8 o'clock actually, and I don't have Windows running on the computer yet, but you can see it is running. And in fact, over here on this monitor is what's called Parted Magic. Now this is a really quick little story here. Parted Magic is a Linux distribution that's specifically designed for working with hard drives and fixing partitions and stuff. And what's so special about it is it loads to RAM. So on my 16 gigs of RAM in this thing, this is taking up like 400 megabytes or whatever, and it's running along perfectly fine. Now, this is showing me a couple things. It's showing me that the system is working as a whole. I can pull up internet and everything else because, of course, it loaded drivers for all the hardware in the computer here. So it's effectively a virtual operating system. And everything is running fine. By the way, I used Ultimate Boot CD. You can see there's a copy of it here. This is one of many programs on this particular CD, and you can download this for free. When I get to the ability to actually fully edit all the descriptions in here, hopefully I'll be able to put a link in the description. But at any rate, this Linux distribution over here will allow me to work with the hard drive and do all kinds of stuff. Now, the reason why I'm going this route for now is because this morning, before I went to work, I tried to load Windows 10 off of a USB stick in this computer, and it did the same thing. It got through starting to actually install the software, and the computer kicked out on me, which is very strange. Also, I should point out, if I flip this over, I have on my server the SSD from here, and that's actually going through a full format. The difference between quick format and full format, quick format just basically, in the least technical ways possible, it just deletes the index for the hard drive, so it just seems like the hard drive's blank, but your stuff's really just there. Full format, it actually writes data, I think zeros and zeros in sequence to the entire drive, and then that way it clears out all the data on there. And I'm doing that because I made a clone of it. So if I have to back up something, I can just get the backup off the clone. And the other reason is because I want to make sure everything's eliminated from that, just to make sure there's no little problems in case this thing tries to load later. And I also wanted to make sure I can fully write to that SSD, because I had a feeling that maybe the reason why this was having a problem is because I reached the end of the life on the SSD. Again, not real technical, because I wanted to not make that the point of this video, but hard drives and SSD both have a limited lifetime. And the thing with SSDs is you can't write to them after a certain point, but you can always read, from what I understand. So technically you'll never lose your data, you just won't be able to write to it, because I guess there's cycles it has to go through, and I'll have another video, I'm sure, at some point with explaining that. But the other side of it is hard drives, when they go, I don't think you can read or write to them. They just don't become workable anymore. And I've seen that happen before, and if you don't have a backup, you're pretty much out of luck. But SSDs seem like, you know, you can definitely access it. But of course, the time span is, you know, I understand some drives, it's like 40 gigabytes a day you'd have to write to it, and for it to have like limited life, like a year, you know, a couple years or something like that. But I think it's quite a long lifespan. I don't have all the numbers off the top of my head right now, but I know it's definitely a lot longer than hard drives typically go for, it seems like. But anyway, at this point, I'm going to get out of this Linux program here and boot back to that disk, because there's actually a stress test on there. Because my other theory was this thing's overheating at a certain point, but clearly, I mean, I don't think that's the case. Plus, I got all these fans I can kick on in this thing up to full speed. There's a 120 up front, a 120 there. There's two 80s pulling out. There's a 120 up in the power supply that's actually controlled by these two. Yeah, I mean, I'm using the stock cooler, but I've been for years, so maybe it's finally gone. I mean, I don't know. I've gone back to reconsidering a new one again. So it all depends on what the stress test and, you know, trying to install Windows again. Worst case scenario, I'm thinking of just using a spare hard drive I have around here just to get it up and running, just to see if it's a problem with the SSD, because if I have to replace that, I have to replace that. Well, anyway, I just wanted to end the earlier part of the video I shot a couple days ago. Should be able to stitch them together here online eventually, and you should be able to see this, guys, tonight, hopefully. And maybe by Thursday, when I have my next video, I'll have some good news for you. It's just been, you know, I can do a lot with my tablet, but just not so much. So when I get back to the full swing of everything, I hopefully have a ton of videos for you guys. I've already been getting a couple requests for doing a video on how to solder, and it's definitely on my list of priorities. So once I get everything up and running again, I will definitely have that video coming along, as well as the one I already have recorded, ready to be edited. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys later.